Tom was absolutely perfect on the timing side. So if you want to ask him questions, catch him when he wanders down the hall down there. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker, who's going to be looking at a review and outlook for the ferroalloys industry and minor metals, is Lara Smith. If she can come up to the podium, please. Lara is Core Consultants Managing Director and Founder. She began her career as an analyst for an asset management company, obviously looking at mining stocks and other things, and she then joined the Steinmetz Group as the lead analyst responsible for sourcing, analyzing, and valuing potential mining acquisitions in Africa and the Baltic regions. She's undertaken work on behalf of Ernst & Young, the National Treasury, African Rainbow Minerals, Eskom, and various South African government infrastructure projects. She's also been contracted to the Metals Bulletin and produced the Metal Bulletin Lithium Market Outlook Report. This contract work formed part of the inception of Core Consultants itself. She holds multiple degrees in financial analysis, portfolio management, chemistry, stats, economics, science, and maths education. I'm just surprised she's also not a geologist, but maybe that was a stretch too far. But she is about to give you, I'm sure, a wonderful presentation. Please welcome Lara.
First thing, how do I work this? Do I just press here?
I think just go forward on
Okay,
the
cool.
greenie. If you need to go back one. So
Great.
there we go. You're right there.
Okay.
Just keep having a look on the left here. We'll have the
Okay.
time there. But I'll start at 5.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would just like to thank the Mining Indaba for coordinating this conference and affording Core Consultants the opportunity to address you at this forum. Core Consultants offers analyses and insights into both bulk metals and minor metal markets, and as such we have been requested to provide a high-level overview of these two industries. In fulfillment of this request, we have chosen to present our analyses on the cobalt, lithium, and ferrochrome markets. So if we kick off with cobalt, I don't know how well you can see that, but over 50% of the cobalt reserves are contained in the DRC. Yet only 5% of refined cobalt is actually produced in the region. But in contrast, China produces nearly 40% of refined cobalt and yet lacks reserves. In essence, there's traditionally been a relationship between the DRC and China, whereby unrefined ore is exported to China for beneficiation. It is this dynamic that the DRC is trying to change so as to encourage fixed investment in the country in the form of beneficiation. In terms of end users, cobalt has traditionally been consumed by the superalloys industry to make parts for gas turbine engines. However, over the last decade, growth in the use of cobalt batteries has usurped all other applications and now accounts for 27% of cobalt consumption. We now consider the outlook for cobalt demand. Roughly 3.6 grams of cobalt is required for cellular phone batteries. Since 2005, the number of mobile phone subscribers has increased by 3 billion to 5 billion subscribers today. If we consider the average global penetration rate of cellular users is around 75%, we believe that there are still substantial gains to be made in this market, especially in Africa and Asia, where the penetration rates are only 41% and 68% respectively. The most exciting development in the battery space is that for electric vehicles. A good approximation to use is 4 kilograms of cobalt for every hybrid vehicle and 6 kilograms for every electric vehicle. At present, we estimate that there are about 340,000 hybrid and electric vehicles that have been produced in 2010, and those consume roughly 1.2 kilotons of cobalt per year. We predict that over the next 10 years, the cumulative number of hybrid and electric vehicles will be close to 13 million, or 14% of all cars on the road. To support this growth would require almost 13 kilotons of cobalt per annum. I would just like to mention that the details of this analysis are available in the upcoming lithium report, which Core Consultants authored and will be published by Metal Bulletin next month. The use of cobalt in superalloys remains a major demand industry. With respect to future requirements, in January this year, Airbus announced that 6,800 family aircrafts have been ordered. Additionally, the largest firm bid was for 180 planes by Indigo, an Indian company, and that will be fulfilled over the next 5 years. Meanwhile, Boeing expects 31,000 planes to be delivered over the next 20 years, so we do expect substantial growth still from this market. The outlook for cobalt use as a catalyst is still positive. The growth is expected to be driven by increased demands for FMCGs, as cobalt is used in PET manufacturing. And additionally, we have attained peak oil. That is the point where the daily production begins to decline. This occurrence is expected to drive higher oil prices, which should further spur the use of gas-to-liquid technology. So we'll get investment by petroleum companies in that. Cobalt is basically used in the Fischer Topich process, and about 35% of all cobalt catalysts are consumed by the petroleum industry. Incidentally, we believe that the peak oil phenomenon will also drive electric vehicle production. Turning our attention to supply, the majority of new production is expected to come from the DRC, which brings with it substantial political risk. To name a few recent events, in November 2010, the US Congress passed a law requiring that US governments disclose where their metals originate in order to create awareness about demanding metals from conflict zones. Our concern is that this could be a precursor to further legislation which will ultimately limit exports from the DRC. As a result, we expect increased emphasis on diversifying cobalt supply away from the DRC. What is interesting is that the China Metallurgical Mining Corporation have invested $1.4 billion in a nickel-cobalt project in Papua New Guinea. This represents the biggest overseas non-ferrous metal undertaking by Beijing. This suggests that the DRC is seen as a high-risk venture, and there is a very real drive, even by China, to diversify away from DRC reliance. From the DRC's perspective, in August 2010, the government added $60 per ton tax on unbeneficiated ore, and in December, the government suspended issuing new mineral concessions. So basically what we can take away from this slide is that while we do not believe that the cobalt market is at a risk of undersupply, there is a very real need and indeed a drive to diversify and create alternative supply sources for this market. Overall, we expect that the market will remain in surplus until 2014, narrowing slightly in 2015. This is driven by the nickel market gains, which has increased production rates. Thereafter, we expect that the market will tighten. With respect to prices, high stocks among the Chinese producers are expected to limit short-term gains. In speaking to traders recently, there was an indication that 7% cobalt was selling for $14 to $14.50 per pound, so this suggests that the market is still adequately supplied. In terms of LME contract prices, we foresee cobalt remaining in the $18 to $20 per pound range over the next year, though we anticipate demand to increase, driven predominantly by growth in the battery sector. Okay, let's turn our attention to the outlook for lithium. A lot of the drivers for lithium are the same as the drivers for cobalt. Over 60% of the lithium reserves are contained in the lithium triangle in the brine deposits of Argentina, Chile, and Bolivia. Until 1997, production was firmly entrenched in the USA, Russia, Australia, and Canada, and produced from hard rock mineral sources. In that year, the Chilean fertilizer company SQM entered the market by producing lithium carbonate from brine sources, which aggressively drove down prices, forcing the reduction or closure of the higher cost, typically hard rock operations. This maneuver established Chile as the single most important producer of lithium, and the brine deposits as the most important and most common source of lithium. It has been over a decade since SQM entered the market and changed the shape of the industry. Since this time, the price of lithium carbonate boomed to a peak of around $6,612 per ton, and then fell back in 2009-2010 to a low of $5,069 per ton. Since then, prices have rebounded to an average of $5,750 per ton, and many juniors are again able to explore new lithium deposits. At these prices, the margins are such that higher cost producers are able to operate economically. Proposed capacity additions for the next 3 years are anticipated to be around 49,000 tons on an LCE basis, 39% of which is expected to come from the higher cost hard rock sources. We expect that existing brine producers will react to these new entrants by reducing their prices to protect their market shares. At these pricing levels, the margins are large enough to make the strategy worthwhile. Already we have heard that the Chilean producers are selling lithium carbonate to China at around $3,400 per ton FOB. That was in December. On the demand side, lithium has traditionally found its application in industrial uses, partly as a glazing agent in glass and ceramics. However, as in the case of cobalt, today batteries account for nearly a quarter of overall demand. If we consider a few lithium battery applications, typical cell phone and laptop batteries consume 3.4 to 70 grams of lithium respectively. Using these estimates, the same estimates that were shown in the cobalt discussion, we anticipate that lithium consumption from the sector will grow 11% over the next 5 years. With respect to the electrification of vehicles, the lithium required in an automotive battery is based on a rate of 1.6 kilogram per kilowatt hour, which calculates to around 12 kilograms for a hybrid and 30 kilograms for an electric vehicle. As discussed, the penetration rate of hybrid and electric vehicles are presently low, but we expect that the market should increase for 25% over the next decade. Growth of this magnitude, which is expected to be exponential, would necessitate an extra 15 kilotons of carbonate by 2015 and 80 kilotons by 2020. It would be remiss of us not to mention that the growth is not expected to continue unabated. We expect that the market will reach a steady state by around in the next 15 years, and thereafter recycling of lithium batteries will become the norm. We estimate that demand for other lithium applications should grow at GDP rates. We apply a 4% growth rate to ceramic and glass industries and 2.5% for other applications. We believe that the greatest opportunities for the glass market are in India and China, which are prioritizing their automotive and construction industries. New car purchases and home ownership is incumbent upon a stable middle class, as well as a means of diversifying away from growth on exports. Automotive and construction sectors account for 95% of the market share for flat glass in 2010. In terms of overall consumption, we believe that the demand will increase to the present from the 123,000 tons on a lithium carbonate basis to 165,000 tons by 2015. On the question of whether the market will be adequately supplied, which is a question we get all the time, we believe that there's actually a risk of it being oversupplied. 2010 production is estimated at 122,000 tons, and based on announced capacity additions, are expected to rise to 180,000 tons by 2015. We do, however, expect that producers will temper their capacity utilization so as to mitigate against the risk of oversupply. In summary, we believe that the lithium market is a short-term risk of downward price adjustment. The margins, especially for brine producers, are sufficient to entice new entrants. They are also sufficient to enable existing brine producers to cut market prices and keep new entrants at bay. There is also the risk that much anticipated electric automotive market may not gain sufficient traction, which would again render the lithium market in oversupply. Based on our analyses, the details of which can be found in our upcoming Lithium Market Report, which Core Consultant authored and Metal Bulletin will be publishing next month, we anticipate that the prices for lithium carbonate will remain subdued in the $4,400 to $4,600 per ton mark over the next 5 years before returning to the around $5,500 per ton levels.